Welcome everyone to This Week in Svelte, episode 146. Today we have a guest, and as I've said, it's a project that I've been eyeing for a long time. It's a very nice project, and I'm very excited to hear more about it. And it's also probably I don't think for the first time, but it's one of the first time that it's not actually a library. It's an actual project that's built with Svelte. So that's very, very nice. So let's jump right into the changelog. Did we start early? No, it's the usual time. So let's jump right into the changelog. And well, we did it. Svelte didn't have any release yet. As you can see, it's summer. So let's move to SvelteKit, and that's also why we don't have a release for Svelte, is because we are moving toward SvelteKit 3.0, so there is a lot more work happening on the SvelteKit side. And let's jump here. So we are basically moving all the breaking changes out of the way. So let's see, we have breaking, remove, base, asset, and resolve root from $up/pods. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I can't remember if this is the case. But basically, we're not just removing them. I think we are doing that because we are moving that to a different no, maybe they're just removed altogether. I think there was a plan to move them to a different module, but let's see. Breaking requires Svelte config option to be passed through the Vite plugin. Oh, that's actually nice. So as you can see, as you may know, recently we made a change so that now the Svelte config is not a file anymore. It's something that's passed through the Vite plugin. It falls back to Svelte config if it doesn't find something in the Vite plugin, but SvelteKit 3 will actually require that to be passed through the Vite plugin. So it's a nice, it's a small thing, but it's one less file, so that's nice. Another breaking change, goto now reject when called with a URL that does not resolve to a root within the app, matching the existing behavior for external URLs. So basically, if you now try to do goto and pass an external URL, it will reject that URL. So I wonder if does not resolve to a root within the app. It means that even if you are redirecting, it's a problem. I would assume no. Let's actually see the reasoning. And now errors if you navigate to a route that doesn't exist, even when it's a relative route. This also changes remote function to use goto to navigate to redirects so that they don't error for external redirect. Yeah, okay, so basically if you do this, you get an error, but if you do non-existent route, it doesn't error. So in this case, it's more for consistency. Breaking, add error result type to preload data. So preload data, it's a way for you to programmatically start loading the data from the load function. I don't know if it's already changed, and it will actually preload the data of a certain, including remote functions. I think it's still just for load function, but now if it error out, the result will know that it errored out. Breaking require Vite 8.0.12, the first Vite 8 release, building stable roll down. Bundling stable roll down 1.0. So if you know Vite it was using rollup, which is like another famous project from Rich Harris. It was using rollup. It is now using roll down, which is a rewrite of rollup in Rust. And Vite8 was already using roll down, but up from the 8.0.12, it's using roll down 1.0.0, which is the first stable version. And so, like, now basically, like, we want to use the Vite that it's using the stable release of roll down. Yeah, Rich casually redefining web dev. Yeah, if you take a look at how many libraries Rich wrote that are like essential to the web, Magic String, it's another one, which is like to change a string non-destructively and also get back source map from it. Rich also wrote that, and I think most Vite plugins actually use that. Minor change, so a new feature, expose submitted property on remote forms, so that's nice. Fix clear issue and touched state on form reset. I don't know if we talked about it this before, but basically now there is also touched on the form, which basically means if that field has been actually touched. This way you can actually just show errors only if the user actually typed into it. Return 404 for form action and remote function whose name is an object prototype member. This is a small like nice thing in the sense that if you basically, like, what could you do is try to invoke a remote function which has the name which is part of the object prototype. And since we are basically compiling an object with all the remote functions, when you try to invoke a remote function that's named to string, it will actually invoke the object prototype member, and now it's instead returning 404, which is the right thing to do. It's like technically a security fix, but it's not really a security fix because you couldn't do anything malicious with that, but it's better to return 404, which is what you actually need to return. Send periodic keep alive SSA comments from query.live to prevent idle timeout errors. This is actually something, sorry, it's my son. It's coming to say hi. Okay. Basically, this is something that it's actually decently annoying, and it's the fact that every single like reverse proxy, like Nginx or stuff like that, they treat server sent event differently. So, for example, Nginx will not push like flush down the server sent stream until you reach a certain amount of data. There are others that will actually close and time out if you don't send anything. And so, like, we now have to send some keep alive comments, which will not affect in any way the reactivity on the page, but it's just a comment which is actually spec'd inside the server sent event spec, and we have to send them every once in a while, otherwise it will time out, which is annoying. Render pages over sibling endpoint without get or head handler. So if there are endpoints in the same route as a page, and the endpoint does not have a get or a head, it will fall back to render the page. Sort directory entries when building the root manifest, so node indices are deterministic across runtime. Oh, come on. So basically, like, this manifest is an object that we create when you are building your application to know which, like, where is each root. And but apparently when you have like you have to sort them so that in ban and node they are deterministic. Otherwise, what could happen is that like if when you run it with node, you get a thing. When you run it with ban, you get a different thing. I'm very curious about the bug. Dev server hydration error when using ban. With multiple root groups, start the dev server. Yeah, basically ban was loading something in a different order, which meant there was a different. Yeah, that's very annoying. Sorry. Okay, so include hosted packages in vite server.fs.allow list. This is something like vite. Basically, you cannot access every single file in vite. You have to you can basically read from the server every single file which is inside source, I think. Even if you try to read the root of the repo, it will not actually work. I'm curious about what's these hosted packages. So let me actually open in a new tab and let's see what we can learn about. The vite function is important to find where the hosted sym-linked packages are stored. Okay. So I've reached one more thing. My monorepo npm run dev fails with the request ID. Absolute patch to my file is outside of vite. I got kit installed in the root package JSON, and the app is reaching out of its own directory into a packages directly in the root. Okay. Okay, so this was the next 5. We have next 6, which is breaking, return no content for 204 responses. 204 is no content. And so it's basically saying, okay, you get an okay response, but it has no content. And I assume if you were returning 204 and specifying something, it was still returning content. Breaking, form action responses now use HTTP status code returned from fail. So if you invoke fail inside a response, I don't know if you know about this, but basically in SvelteKit, if you had a form action, even if you said, okay, fail 400, the status code was still 200. This had a reason before, I can't remember. I can't remember why it was made this way, but now in SvelteKit 3 will not be anymore. So if you fail 400, you will actually get a 400 response. Breaking, nested server-only directories. So if you know in SvelteKit, you can add .server to any folder or file, and you couldn't, basically, if you try to import that file from the client, it will actually warn and error out at build time, so you cannot ship something from the server inadvertently. However, it did not work. If I'm not mistaken, you could still use it on a folder, but it only took care of the last part of the folder. So if you had a server folder and then a nested folder with known server file, then it was allowed. And we wanted to do this before, but it was a breaking change, because if you had, if you were importing something on the client from that folder, you would get an error. And now in SvelteKit 3, we can actually do it. So we are basically going over every single thing that we couldn't do in SvelteKit 2 and doing it now. Breaking, add kit.path.origin config option, remove kit.prerender.origin and the adapter node origin environment variable. So this is how you specify which origin your app will live on. And it's important for pre-rendering because you want to when you are pre-rendering, you want to fetch from the origin, I think, yeah. And now it's just kit.paths.origin instead of pre-render and then having to use the origin environment variable in adapter node. Breaking, don't abort navigation when calling invalidate all during navigation. So if you were invoking invalidate all during navigation, before it was aborting the navigation, and now it's not anymore. Allow handle error to influence status code. Handle error is once again invoked every time you have an error in your application. And now you can also change the status code from handle error, because before I think it was 500 by default, but maybe you want to say, hey, if this is the error, I want to return a 400 or a 404, and now you can do it. Forbid external redirects by default. That's also another important bit. Fit use type module for service worker registration. This is also something that I've run into, like service workers. Luckily, now you can use type module to actually use modules inside service worker. It was not available in Firefox up until recently, but now it's baseline. And so now if you are registering a service worker with SvelteKit, it will default to type module. Yeah, forbidding external redirects would save, let me highlight this message very quickly. Forbidding external redirects will save a lot of people who don't properly sanitize their input. Yeah, obviously. Add dirty property to form fields. Once again, this is kind of the touched part, like in the sense that if it is dirty, it means that it changed from the original value. So you can use this to only show errors if they are dirty. Add cookie.parse method. This is also nice. It's basically a way for you to parse a set cookie thing and add it to the cookie. Yeah, basically, like, the point is, if you fetch something and they return a set cookie header, you can now basically do this. Like, you can do cookie.parse and get the name, the value, and the option of the cookie, and then setting the cookie in SvelteKit, because you have to use cookie.set in SvelteKit, and before it was basically like you had to manually parse the cookie and stuff like that, and instead now it's like provided by SvelteKit. Okay, we have some fixes. Drain unconsumed request body, so keep alive connection, don't hang. This is something like, it's so annoying when you have to do stuff with streams and requests. You have to be very careful about this kind of stuff, where you actually, like, if it's not consumed, you still have to consume it in some way, otherwise it will leak and stuff like that. Properly handle date object in forms.fields.set. So if you are setting a field to a date object, it now properly handled. Skip clean field when programmatically validating forms. Oh, that's nice. Basically, if a field is clean, you don't have to validate it because it means that it didn't change from the original value. Breaking experimental remote form validate include untouched option is now all. Okay, return undefined fields.branch.issues when only fields.branch.leaf has issue. Okay. Feed add field.touched helper to remote form field. I feel like this should have been before next 5. Maybe, I don't know. Let's see, we have also a release of 2.68.0, so it's still Svelte 2, expose remote form enhance instance and remote form enhance callback types, set value of submit fields when form is submitted, skip native navigation when data.json return 404 on a static fallback page. Ignore third-party monkey patches in push state and replace state warning detection. So if you ever, like, I think like this is pretty common, but basically if you do push state or replace state, like you have to use push state from SvelteKit to guarantee that the router has knowledge about that thing, right? So if you do window.pushState, SvelteKit cannot possibly know that the state changed, and so it gets out of sync with the internal knowledge of what route you are on. And so, like, we could have monkey patched push state, and like so that even if you did it, it was fine. But the better approach, which I think like Rich and the team did, is that instead of doing this, we just monkey patched push state and replace state in dev mode, so that if you do it, you get a warning, so that you can actually fix it. And this is fine, but there were some third-party like libraries or extension that were doing push state and replace state, and so you were still getting the warning as if your code was doing it, and so now it's not anymore. Snapshot form field on read. Strip field prefix before erroring on duplicates. Okay. Call reset function via prototype. Okay. So like when you right now there is a reset function in the form instance, which ultimately also need to reset the form. And so instead of doing form.reset, now they're doing like they are accessing on the prototype, which is better. Fixed navigation type hover info. I mean, this is just a type issue. New release expose submitted property on form remote. This is just backporting something to 69. Clear issue and touch state on form reset. Yeah, we already talked about this. Prevent prototype pollution when deleting file inputs. Okay. Prevent unhandled promise rejection. Set define values on global Ds when running vtest. So I've seen a few back and forth on this issue. Basically, for some reason, when you define something in vtest, in vt, you can use a define, and basically you have two strings, and you have one string and another string, and basically vt will, when it's bundling, it will replace this string with this other string everywhere. For some reason, vtest doesn't do that. Like they specifically remove the define, and this also means, however, that there are some SvelteKit defined variables that should be available and they are not, and so now we are putting them on the global Ds so that they actually works. A new major breaking change: form error type from any to up error undefined. So when you have form.error, it's not any anymore, but you can actually define inside your up.d.ts. Feed allow adapters to provide additional Vite plugins. Oh, that's nice. So now adapters can actually add more Vite plugins. There is also a question, let me answer it very quickly, which is I haven't kept up with the roadmap. When are we vaguely expecting Kit 3.0? Seem it's quite early in development, so I'm not expecting it soon. We don't have a specific like goal, but it shouldn't be too late. Like, yeah, we didn't release a lot of next version of 3.0, but there was a 3.0 branch, I think, at least from a couple of months. So like Rich, Simon, Elliot, they are all working full time on this. I think also Teaming is working basically full time on this. So like we have 4 people working full time on this. So I would say like I don't have a date, but like it shouldn't be too long. Move tracing out of the experimental namespace and remove the instrumentation flag. So now it's not experimental anymore, the observability part. Breaking, this will probably be annoying for a lot of people, which is removing $up/stores. Even if you're using some library that it's using store, it will break. Disallow .remote.ts file unless experimental remote function is enabled. Right now, this is not the case in SvelteKit 2 because it's a breaking change. Like if you add a .remote.ts file, it should continue to work. But in SvelteKit 3, we can actually error out so that if you try to use remote function and you don't have the experimental flag enabled, it will like let you know. Remove param files in folder in favor of param.js.ts file. This is another decent packing change if you were using params. Basically, params, I don't know if you know about this, but basically, yeah, let me go to the Svelte docs. I think it's easier to SvelteKit params. Observability, where is params? Advanced routing, probably. Matching, yeah. So this is what works right now. Basically, if you have something like this, source root fruits page would match fruits apple, but it will also match fruits rocket ship. We don't want that. You can ensure that the root parameters are well formed by adding a matcher, which basically takes a string, which is the parameter, as input, and it returns true if it is valid or false if it's not valid. So in this case, if you do this and you then say that page is equal to fruit, this will only match, this root will only match if the parameter is apple or orange. So this is very nice. And you can do this right now with this source.params/name of the parameter, in this case, which then you can use inside the page. However, we are changing that, and now there is a params.js/.ts file, which you can use. And the nice thing about this is that you can not only do this, but you can also validate the parameter. So you can actually, I mean, it sounds the same, but it's not only that. So let me actually, yeah, instead of having to declare one parameter per match, you now declare all of them within one file. Define param function. You can either parse a standard schema object or a function that either throw or return the parsed value if you don't want to bring a schema library. So the point is basically instead of defining the function yourself, you can use something from standard library, which you will likely have anyway because of remote functions. And so you can basically do this, something like this. Yeah, you can basically do something like this, where the param matcher is either this, or it can be something like zod.courseNumber.int.parse. So like it's a very nice way to basically use a validation library to say this parameter needs to be a string, for example, or needs to be a number, and stuff like that. So we have defer query.refresh in server commands until the command body completes. So this basically changes the fact that if you invoke query.refresh in a server command or form action, the query doesn't run until the body completes. Resolve service worker and tsconfig.json based on vit root setting. Populate app.env / dynamic variable in context, then don't run the dev server such as vit node. Okay, because I think initially this was done on when the dev server was activated, but something like vit node doesn't use the dev server, and so these were not populated, and now it is. No longer throw an impossible situation occurred when a server-only module is imported by both server and client code. Set define values on global this once again. Serve .ico files with image x icon content type. This is just because like a .ico files can only be that kind of image, like of MIME type, and so make paths origin type loser, avoid client build warning about externalizing node async hook, allow reserved word, for example deleter class, as remote function export names. That's nice. Okay, that's it for SvelteKit. We have a new release of Acorn TypeScript, const initializer in ambient context, avoid emitting duplicate comments, allow in operator inside parenthesized expression in a for loop initialized, fixed DTS ambient declaration export validation. This is the parser for TypeScript. Adapter Cloudflare, avoid overriding user existing header rules and update dependency. We will probably see a bunch of update dependency. Yeah. Ensure types from platform context work. Adapter node. Add Axel buffering no header to text event stream so that Nginx actually streams. That's very annoying. Delete existing socket file on startup and updated dependencies. Adapter Vercel, breaking require vit and updated dependencies. We have a new release of enhanced image, require vit 8 point blah 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 blah. Svelte package, there should be a pre-release, declare TypeScript as an optional peer dependency, so Svelte package work under strict node linkers. SV utils, if you are building an add-on for SvelteKit, now we have defined env, which is basically based on which version you are using. If you are using dynamic environment, which is the new way of doing it, it will import that. Otherwise, it will import $up/environment, which is nice. Prevent parse expression from duplicating nearby comments. 3 new release of vit plugin Svelte. Ensure the inspector is injected into the client correctly for vit plus project. Enforce left to right styles for inspector. Add a context menu with current component stack. So this is nice. I don't know if you know about the inspector, but basically, if you enable the inspector, I guess we can show it, sveltelab.dev. This is kind of a superpower of Svelte, which is very nice. I mean, actually, it will not work fully in SvelteLab, but or maybe yes. I think I actually did it. I think. Regardless, in your vit config, you can do this. You can do vit plugin, and you can do inspector. It shouldn't be inspector true. Oh, actually, yeah, okay. Let me move it to the Svelte config. So I think I can do this. Server restart failed. unexpected token. Oh, because I'm missing this. npm run dev. So like the inspector allows you to do this. So if I do option X, I think, you can see that now I have this like nice thing, and I can go over any component, like this is inside plus page.svelte. So if I click this, it will open plus page.svelte. Option X, if I click on this, it will open the counter button. So it is very nice, and I did effectively make it work even in SvelteLab. It is very nice to use, and it doesn't seem to have the updated. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have the updated. I guess maybe I need to. So if I do npm I svelte.js / vite plugin svelte at latest. That's annoying. Could not resolve dependency. Yeah, I need to. Okay, let me do npm I vite at latest. There's a lot of stuff. Vite plugin svelte at latest. Okay, npm run dev. Now, if I did everything correctly, it's downloading a lot of stuff, but now we should have the latest version of Vite plugin svelte, which actually changed the styles a bit. So if I do option X, you can see that now it's nicer, a bit nicer. But most importantly, if you have some nested component, you can actually see the whole stack. So you can see that this is now a button which is inside source lib counter.svelte, but this is used inside plus page.svelte. So if I right click, I can actually see the whole stack. Like this is button and it's counter inside plus page.svelte. So if I click here, it will bring me to the plus page.svelte, which is very nice. Yeah, that's the only thing that I wanted to show. And I need to update the template in SvelteLab. Okay, we have everything in Vite plugin svelte. We have a new release of SV, which is better out import building from $app env when explicit environment variables are enabled. Use the detected package manager in add-on. Next step, playwright and drizzle. Generate prettier.config.js instead of prettier.rc, giving editor auto-completion. That's nice. I mean, prettier.rc, I think it also has auto-completion, but it's nicer. Improve syntax for drizzle config and updated dependency. By the way, if you're using better out with $up env, like explicit environment variables enabled, these will actually fail at runtime unless they actually release, because basically there was an issue. I think better out, I'm pleasantly surprised about this, because a lot of external libraries, if you try to import a module which is specific about SvelteKit, they will just fail, because obviously those are virtual module and they cannot import them. But Better Out actually did something very clever. It was released 3 weeks ago. Basically, Better Out had some specific schemes just for SvelteKit. So I already opened up PR and they actually merged it to fix the issue with Better Out, where basically they basically have this SvelteKit virtual module, and this is a file that is specifically aimed to create a virtual module even when running their CLI, so that even if you go through some files that have some SvelteKit specific modules, they can still run the CLI. That's very nice, and I would love for something like this even from Playwright or Drizzle, for example. So that's very nice, but this also means that now if you're trying to importing from $up/env/private or /public, it will fail, because they have to basically hard code how they work. again, I've opened the PR and they already merged it, so we just need to wait for them to release the CLI. But yeah, that's something to know. We are almost there. We have a new release of Svelte check. Resolve tsgo bin path with package.json. Report tsconfig error in tsgo experimental API. TypeScript 7 was released, which is the new tsgo version, like it's the Go version. But you cannot still use it with Svelte because they don't provide the same plugin API yet. There is a PR kinda open already, so like you will be able to do it soon, but for the moment you cannot use it with Svelte, Vue, and other languages that need the plugin API. Okay, that's it. Sorry, I went very, very long. Now let's switch to the more interesting bit, which is switching to the guest. So let me switch for a second because I need to unmute you. Otherwise, I cannot hear you. Hendrik is here, and he's going to talk about his project, which is called Chatto, and you can actually see it directly here. I'll let him talk a bit more about this, but basically, what Chatto is basically I swear I thought it was inspired by Discord, but you actually told me it's more inspired by Slack, right? Um, but yeah, the point is like it's a chat interface. It's built with Go and Svelte, and I'll let Hendrik talk a bit more about that. I'll mute myself.
All right. So thank you very much. Hi and hi everybody. Also thank you for unmuting me. Very, very useful. But well, you don't know what you got yourself into. So I'm here to talk about Chatto. Yeah, Chatto, as you already just described, is a chat application, right? Kind of like, yeah, Slack, Microsoft Teams, MetaMost, Discord, and so on and so forth. I'm naming Discord last because Discord is actually like from the pantheon of inspirations for this. Discord is actually really the very last in line. But at the same time, which is kind of funny, like most people who see this go like, hey, this is like Discord. Um, I understand, but truth be told, all of these applications are really the same, right? I mean, I can turn this into Slack. Give me a second. Okay, so there you go. It's Slack now. I call this business mode, right? This is just a light mode. I call this business mode because this is like I don't know. I associate a light design much more with Slack and a dark design with Discord, but it's the same app. All of these things have chat, they have a list of people on the side, they have a list of rooms, they have a sidebar with different communities, right? So essentially all these things are the same. And now there's another one. How's Chatto different? So first of all, Chatto is open source, obviously. Um, it's well, it's surprising how many of these applications are not, and it's also surprising how restrictive many of the chat applications out there that are open source are actually for self-hosters. So really the prime directive for this thing is to make it super, super easy and also free to self-host this. It's geared towards all the use cases from business use cases to just communities, gaming communities, open source communities, right? So I'm trying to sort of build this in a way that meets the requirements of both sides, both worlds. It has all the features, or at least it's going to have all the features. Some are still missing because it's still in the middle of development. But it does have audio and video calls. It does have screen sharing. Some people keep bugging me about game streaming, which of course is a whole different beast. I'm going to revisit that next year, hopefully. But I'm really trying to make this have all the features. But it has all the stuff in a well, relatively compact 70 megabyte binary executable, right? So this is really the main goal for this, to make it super, super, super simple to spin up your own server, to spin up your own chat community. So from a technological point of view, that's really the prime directive. Everything has to come with a single binary. Um, it is a bit of a lie. Like, I didn't implement voice calls and video calls myself in this, right? So if you set this up and you actually want voice and video calls, you need another system called LiveKit, which is also open source, and it's also quite compact. It's also written in Go, as far as I know. Um, and then basically Chatto will interface with that. And if you don't need calls, you don't need LiveKit. If you just need text chat, then you really only need that one executable. So yeah, this has been, I opened the repository a couple of days ago. I was very lucky, like I won the Hacker News lottery 2 days ago, which was really exciting because there was a huge influx of users on this. People started using this. People are now spinning up their own communities. And I'd like to talk a little bit about the stack, because obviously Svelte is part of that, and also what it means for this application and what it enables. Just very briefly, let's stay on the product side of things. So I've already talked about how this looks very similar to Discord. You have communities and you can switch between these communities, but this is already the biggest difference between this and something like Discord or Slack or even other open source hosting chat applications. Every single one of these things in the sidebar is its own server, right? So there's not like one server that has tens or hundreds or thousands of communities. Basically, everything that you put into the sidebar is a server run by a person. So a single server serves a single community. This is a design constraint that I chose deliberately because it allows me to basically cheat quite a bit in terms of making this scalable and in terms of making this fast. But this is a really important property. But you also notice, like, I didn't have to go somewhere else. I had someone tell me, hey, this looks like a desktop app. Where's the desktop app? Now that's a PWA, right? So Chatto ships with a Svelte based PWA, actually Svelte kit based, but compiled as an SPA. We're going to get a little bit into that in a couple of minutes. So when you spin up the server, you get this UI, and then you can basically just add other servers using this button. This is a little bit boring at the moment. It just expects you to enter the actual URL of another server. One of the next versions will make this a little bit more interesting with some discovery features that I'm planning. But technically speaking, what this does is it registers the server that you're adding here with the PWA, with the client, and then the client application will just directly connect to the individual servers and talk to them directly. This is almost the first thing that a lot of people ask, like, hey, does this thing do federation? Because I want federation. No, it doesn't do any federation. There's no federation between servers. This is also on purpose. First of all, because I'm lazy and federation is kind of complex. But also, I thought it's it's a feature. It's a feature that, you know, when you operate your chat community, you know that your chat information and also the private information of your users, it never leaks into other servers, right? If you start federating, you have like a whole category of additional issues that you have to think about. You have content from other servers, other instances invading your own database. You have to like think about what instances to block and stuff like that. And I didn't really want all those features. And also, since this is also targeted at business use, turns out that also businesses get really worried and really nervous when you tell them, hey, this thing federates and it's going to pull in data from servers you don't know. So I wanted to avoid that as well. This is the design. I just had a conversation with someone in the community earlier today where I sort of admitted that technically speaking, strictly speaking, it still is sort of federation, but the federation happens in the client, right? The client talks to the different servers, it aggregates data. That's basically where federation happens. But it's not the sort of federation that people think of when they think of something like Matrix or Mastodon and other federating protocols. So yeah, this is basically the product. I'm going to stop talking about the actual application now. If you've ever used any of these chat applications, you know exactly how this works, right? You have rooms. I have to be a little bit careful because the community knows that we are live. I really hope you're behaving, community. So let's quickly skip through this a little bit. You have rooms, you have direct messages, you have notifications. Notifications are aggregated across different servers. You have a fancy command switcher that you can use to quickly jump to anything that you're connected to, which is really convenient. So basically, the same sort of features that you're used to in the other applications, but in a compact package that you can just put on a small VM and get started. And it's really fast. It's really, really fast. So I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to we have the German word Vorführ effect. Let's see if that happens. It's the word for you want to show something that always works, but then it doesn't work when you actually want to show it to a lot of people. But I'm just going to scroll to the top of this channel, right? I didn't preload the messages, right? So this is loaded live from the server. I spent quite a lot of time optimizing the data loading. Svelte's speed itself, of course, is a contributing factor. And also the backend is doing some things that make this quite fast. I hope I'm not scrolling past any naughty bits. Right, that's it. That's March. Cool. Right. So let's talk about the stack a little bit. Of course, the front end is Svelte, and as I mentioned earlier, it's actually Svelte Kit. But I instructed SvelteKit to compile this into a single page application, which to me personally is almost frustrating because I freaking love SvelteKit. I love remote functions. I love all the new bits. They're amazing. In my last job, we did quite a lot of SvelteKit things where we actually got to use those toys, right? Really superb experience. I really love it, and I'm really kind of sad that that I can't make use of it in this project. I could theoretically do something that a lot of people like doing and basically have a separate backend for front end type thing, right? Where you still have a Go backend, and then next to that you install. Basically, you deploy the SvelteKit full stack application as a sidecar, and then I could be doing remote functions and everything. But that would have sort of violated my goal to just really make this a single binary. The story is super, super important to me. So what did I do instead? I configured SvelteKit to compile the SPA. And then I embed the entire front end into the binary. The backend, the binary itself, is written in Go, which over the last couple of years has become one of my favorite programming languages, maybe even the favorite programming language, for the simple reason that it's super boring. It's just such a wonderfully boring language. I love it. Funnily enough, I spent 10 years hating it for the same reason. I spent 10 years bouncing off of Go because every time I looked at it, I went like, this is boring. You know, I'm going to bore myself to death with that language. And then suddenly I realized that I was about to turn 50 and thought, you know what? In my old age, boring is actually quite fun. So I fell in love with Go. Um, and there are other factors in this that make Go really amazing that we may dive into a little bit later. But the important bit for Svelte is in Go, you can just embed stuff from the file system. You can just take stuff that exists in the file system, you can embed it into the binary, and then basically Go gives you sort of like a small virtual file system that you can read from. And that's what Chatto does. So when you spin it up, it spins up a web server, very boring web server. And that web server, when you access it, it basically just serves the static build of the Svelte application. because I really wanted to make the deployment story as easy and smooth as possible. I even configured the build pipeline to generate gzipped and bzipped versions of the SvelteKit app that are also embedded into the binary. Don't tell anyone. So from those 70 megabytes, I think something like 15 of those is just the front-end application, right? Including prepared gzipped and bzipped archive files just to make it super fast. And the really nice thing is that SvelteKit, even in SPA mode, SvelteKit generates these immutable bundles, right? So all the bundles that it builds are basically hashed and signed and checkmarked, or what do you call it? Checkmarked? No, that's not the right word. Checksummed. Checksummed. Thank you. So basically, when you generate a bundle, the bundle with the content in it is always going to have 100% the same URL, which makes it really, really nice for caching. And of course, the Svelte application is a full PWA. It installs a service worker, which is why I was very happy to hear about the service worker news that you talked about earlier. The service worker can cache things very neatly, but it wouldn't even have to, because the browser would do the necessary caching anyway for you. It's just really, really, really fast. At some point a couple of months ago, I examined how much front-end code is being transmitted to the user in Slack and in Discord. And we're really talking about not just one order of magnitude more than what Chatto is serving. I think Discord really took the cake with something like 45 megabytes of front-end resources, right? They are compressed, so it doesn't actually load 45 megabytes through the wire. They deploy a native app anyway, so the bits are already deployed to your computer. But I was really shocked to see that it was 45 megabytes of front-end code. And at that point, when I examined the payload sizes of those apps, I looked at Chatto, and Chatto was at 68 kilobytes, everything included, right? It's not quite as lean now because I started adding TipTap, a wonderful, what you see is what you get, like editor with Markdown support. It's really cool. So that's taking a little bit of size. I baked the font that this is using into the binary, which is like 400 kilobytes or something like that. Why did I do that? Because I really don't want this thing to phone home anywhere when you set it up, right? I really want everything to be included in the binary. I added a couple of other, I added syntax highlighting. I faced the usual problem with the syntax highlighters that they by default want to ship all the grammars in one go, right? And I looked at that and thought like, crap, I just added multiple megabytes of payload size to my application. So I built it that individual grammars for the syntax highlighting are loaded on demand, asynchronously, which is very easy to do on Svelte as well. That was really enjoyable. So basically now the syntax highlighting grammars are only loaded when you actually have something in the viewport that uses that grammar. So I really, really, really tried to go all the way to optimize this. Maybe one neat thing, I wanted to ship notification sounds. So any other app might have like prepared a couple of WAV files or MP3 files or Vorbis files and bundled that. And I could have done that. I could have embedded that into the binary and making the binary grow for another megabyte or two. But what I'm doing is I'm actually synthesizing. I'm synthesizing notification sounds on the fly. I don't have my sound sharing activated, so I can't demo it here. But basically, every notification sound is synthesized on the fly through the wonderful web audio API, which I can totally recommend if you're doing audio things and want to have a little bit of fun. And because this didn't go far enough, I also added dynamic filters, so you can do a little bit of audio engineering and add a little bit of delay and echo to your notification sounds. Why would anyone need that? I don't know, but it's fun. Right. So this is the front-end app, once again, built as an SPA and baked directly into the executable. Of course, it needs to talk to a server process at some point. So maybe let's talk about the API. For the longest time, this thing was using a GraphQL API, which was a really, really nice development experience because you basically had the full typing experience from the API itself to Svelte, right? GraphQL is really big on generating code for you, generating types for you, so that was really cool. But then at some point, I stumbled over a problem around forward compatibility with GraphQL. No need to go too much into detail, but basically it required me to change to a different type of API. So what I'm using now is something called Connect RPC. Which is a protocol buffer-based API. It's very similar to gRPC. And RPC, remote procedure calls, of course, big thing in the Svelte kit world now with remote functions. gRPC itself is a little bit nasty in some ways. Connect RPC is basically the easy mode version of that. And luckily, it gives me the same kind of properties that the GraphQL API gave me. So everything is still typed. I have in the repository, there's a package that I'm not yet publishing anywhere. Also, there's no need because everyone can just generate that themselves with types generated from the API itself. And it's just a really nice and fun API. Because it's very fast, very efficient. Protocol buffers is basically binary payloads. It just transmits the actual structs with the information. That's the simple way to put it over the wire. So another factor in me being able to just scroll all the way back and basically scroll past every single message loaded without any trickery around skeletons or loading indicators or similar stuff. Right. Yeah, so that's been the front end side. That's been the Svelte side. Paolo, should I keep going, or do you have a question to ask?
I mean, I do have a few questions if you want, but
Go ahead.
so like I keep them aside. So I will be back a bit in time to where you were talking about. So something that like kind of struck my curiosity was, so obviously, as you said, like the federation is basically done client side. Like a question that I had is like, does this mean that whenever you add a new server, you have to register for that server like separately, or how does that work? Like, if you are registered in like Chatto AQ, it automatically registers you from when you add the new server, or how does that work?
First of all, excellent question because it's a big topic at the moment and also a focus of my work for the next version. So strictly speaking, just looking at Chatto itself, every Chatto server is completely isolated by design. So every Chatto server has its own user base, it has its own accounts, and it leaves it to the operator, to the person running that server, to configure it the way that they want. This is also to basically accommodate the fact that there are wildly different types of Chatto users. I hope there will be, at least, that will have very, very different requirements for this, right? So if you're a company using this, right, you will want to wire this up to your existing identity provider. And you will want nobody else to sign into the server because it's your company chat, right? If you're just spinning up a server that should be open and should be part of the wider community, the Chattoverse, then you want what you just said. You wanted to make it really easy for people to sign up and create accounts, right? And today, the current state, the story isn't good enough yet, because today, if you use the version that's currently released, 0.4.3, basically the best that you can do is either set up email registration and ask your users to create an account the manual way, or you set up some sort of identity provider that you wire up through OIDC. So this is already possible today, but it's not the final answer, right? So this is not something that's good enough. So the focus for the next version that I'm working on is basically around that. This and discovery, right? For the Chattoverse, I want to make it easier to find servers to join, right? Basically to replace this dialogue with something that basically hints you, it sort of prods you a little bit toward cool servers that you could join. And also, I want to use that opportunity to do a little bit of basically, I'm going to try to avoid the F word, federation. You could call it identity federation, but I really don't want to call it that. Basically, I want to make it that as soon as you have an account on one of these servers, you can use that account to quickly sign up on other servers as well.
Yeah.
So um, we already know that a single server, let me just open this in a browser instead, right? So the Chatto server is just, it just has, this is probably not large enough in the stream, but
Yeah,
anyway, yeah,
it's
I'm just pointing.
more or less. Well, yeah.
Yeah, so the important point is each Chatto server has a domain name, right? It has a host name. Every user has a username. So if you really wanted to, you could say like, every user in Chatto is already sort of like username at hostname. That sounds kind of familiar, right? So that sounds kind of familiar. So this is something that I want to explore, but ideally, and that's the tricky part, in a very lightweight fashion. That well, it doesn't work like federation, but basically just shared accounts.
Yeah. I think, by the way, like you should, like specifically for this, you should really explore also the idea of using like building on top of at proto, because
Yeah,
that's basically the like the idea behind that proto. So that
yeah.
like that
It's
couldn't really work for companies and stuff like that. So like that might not be the only way to, but that would be nice.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have been researching exactly that over the last 2 weeks quite a lot. There's a pull request already open that I haven't merged yet for letting people log in using AdProto. And I do want to merge that. I do want to support AdProto logins. But I want to get a better idea first of what role App Protocol might serve in this sort of application, because as you just hinted at, it could be more than just the login, right? It could also take over things like storing your client-side preferences. It could take over things like keeping a register, keeping track of these servers that you've signed up with. And I would absolutely love to do that. I would absolutely love to do that. The two big problems are that private data is not ready in that protocol, right? And this would need to be private data. So I can't, in a good conscience, make the servers that you are signed into public data. And secondly, of course, the topic of adoption. And funnily enough, that second problem, the problem of adoption, doesn't really bug me all that much, for a slightly wild reason. At some point during this research, I actually thought about turning this into a PDS. So basically, transparently turning every account into an @proto compatible account, right, without people knowing, and basically sneaking @proto
Yeah.
into the world by way of Chatto. Don't tell anyone. Viewers of this stream, you have to keep this secret, right? But anyway, this at this point, this is just it's an idea. It's an idea that I'm exploring. Can't make any promises, but it's something that could be fun, right? And that would answer the question like of organizations. But we don't use @proto. Yeah, now you do, because this can be used as a PDS.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who knows? Might happen.
Yeah, that's nice. I also had another question, but there's also a question from the chat, so I'll give precedence to them. And oh, I need to refresh my highlighting messages. Ah, that's annoying. I have to repaste the whole thing. So very quickly. Okay. from Jaza, which is asking, let me do this, is asking, my main question is about encryption, how deep it goes. Is it text only, all media, even metadata? A second one simply about server load concern with how fast the messages load.
Okay, let's talk about encryption first. So first of all, a lot of people, like after asking about federation, the second question is end-to-end encryption. Chatto itself, the core of Chatto does not do end-to-end encryption. This is also a conscious decision, right? For various reasons. First of all, end-to-end encryption for business use is pretty much a non-feature, right? So companies would not want to and not be able to use this if everything was fully end-to-end encrypted. Secondly, end-to-end encryption in a chat is really, really hard to pull off, right? If you have a small conversation with just 2 people, 5 people, 10 people, you can do it. I know how it works. You know, this could work. But in like, if you have a chat room with 5,000 people in it, there's basically, well, you're not going to have a fun time. Having said that, there is a possible future for end-to-end encryption features that are layered on top of Chatto Core, right? So, for example, I think it's very realistic to say that at some point there's going to be optionally end-to-end encrypted direct message conversations or conversations for small groups where the messages are basically encrypted in the payloads as a second layer on top of Chatto itself does. But currently, out of the box, it doesn't do end-to-end encryption. It does, however, put a lot of effort into encryption at rest. Also, because that's a very important feature to have. So no data is stored in any sort of plain text, in any sort of plain form. Every piece of data is encrypted. This means, first of all chat messages, but also all personal data of users. So when you have a user account, the only thing that's actually stored in plain text is your user ID, which is a randomly generated nano ID. When you create this account, Chatto creates a user key for you that can also be rotated, and then it generates a second layer of keys, data encryption keys from that user key, and it uses those data encryption keys to encrypt your username, your display name, your email address, and all the other stuff that is basically personal information, and also every message that you are posting. When you scroll through the history of such a channel, like I just did, all the messages that are loading are actually decrypted on the fly, right? So there's no process or extra database that's like storing the decrypted versions of the messages just to make it fast, right? Everything is actually decrypted on the fly. So I've put a little bit of effort into also make sure that the decrypted data does not stay in the process RAM longer than it needs to be, right? Another good property of this is when a user deletes their account or has their account deleted, then the user key, basically the user's root key, is automatically destroyed. And since this key is destroyed, it basically renders all the other data encryption keys and thus all the data useless. You can no longer read it. It's impossible. Unless your operator is a bad actor and kept a backup of the keys, right? So this is more a feature for the operator, right? To know that they are being compliant towards jurisdictions and laws that require them to actually completely wipe data from someone who leaves the service. It's a more feature for them than for the end user, really. But I think it's a good feature to have, and this is really part of Chatto Core, right? This is core functionality. You can't bypass it. And it's fun because sometimes we have people signing up on the Chatto HQ community, and they look around, and apparently they're not happy with what they're seeing, which insults me very much. So they delete their account again, and then all we see in the channel is deleted user joined the room, deleted user left the room, right? So I have no way of knowing who it was. I have no way of seeing what email address the user used, right? So the data is gone for good.
Yeah, there's definitely someone from Slack. Jaza is also asking which algorithm do you use to like for encryption, basically.
Oh, that's a deep question. It's the cha-cha number something something. I wouldn't have to. I would have to. I would have to look it up. But I'm taking the question as a suggestion that we absolutely should have a page on the documentation website with details on that. So I think that page already exists, but it doesn't go into the detail what algorithm is being used. But yeah, just as a reminder, the code is open source, so anyone who's feeling the need to audit this is well, have at it.
So back at my questions, which actually like kind of ties into this, which is like it's surprisingly fast to scroll and stuff like that, and that leads me like the first thing that I thought is, well, like, is that not virtualized? Because like I know that like if it is virtualized, it's a pretty darn good virtualization because usually when you scroll, even like when you scroll that fast, even for very like virtualized list, like it's very difficult to keep up with the thing, and it's doing it very good. So like, it's just a curiosity.
Yes, the list is virtualized. I'm using a library called Virtua, which has been really great for this. And when I started using this, there were a couple of issues. I think that was just me holding the library wrong, right? But I managed to eliminate those issues, and it's been a total boon, right?
I also
So
love that library, by the way. I've used it too.
yeah,
And
it's I found it very excellent. I this was a couple of months ago. I think I remember trying a different library first. I don't remember what it was, and that just didn't work as well. But Virtua itself, it's chef's kiss, excellent.
yeah,
Really enjoying that.
my last question was about the fact that you are missing SvelteKit. I would miss it too, and I was thinking like, have you thought about um, like I think both in Node and in Dino and in Bun, there are ways to bundle your whole application, your whole Node application as a
Mhm.
single binary. Obviously, like that will not lead to the same speed of Go, but I wonder if you could bundle your SvelteKit application as a single node executable and then bundle that into Go and invoke to get back the DX win of SvelteKit without compromising on the single binary stuff.
I think I would be slightly worried about the size of the resulting binary, right? Because I would need to bundle all of Deno for that or all of Bun. I imagine like if you really sit down and think quite hard, which in 2026 means asking GPT-5 6 Sol. Um, I'm pretty sure you can make it work in some way. I don't know if the result would be fun. The direction that I think is much more interesting is maybe finding a way to plug adapters into SvelteKit that allow you to basically build bridges to something that is not a SvelteKit backend.
Yeah. Uh, there's been experiments for this. Like there's been someone that actually made remote function kind of work with PHP in the backend. Um, it was not super like it was a bit finicky, um, and it's actually something that we are kind of thinking of, but as you might imagine, like it is very because like remote functions works by Vite magic,
Yeah,
and it's very hard to like generalize that magic behind,
yeah,
but
yeah.
that would be very nice. Yeah.
The good thing is like with Connect RPC, I at least, right, this is the only consoling fact really. I at least have an almost remote functions like experience, right? Because Connect RPC is completely typed. The API that Chatto chips is even using reflection, so you can point. If you're using agents, you can point an agent at that API and tell it like, "Hey, build me a bot that speaks to that API and has all the information that it needs." Um, but also, Connect RPC has a very rich SDK ecosystem, so you can basically use something from that pointed at the API URL, and it will generate a client for you, right? Which is basically also just TypeScript functions with all the type setup and everything, right? So this is already very close, and this is really the only thing, why I think I've made my peace with it. I've made my peace with it. It's working. It's working quite fine.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to ask is, like, I wanted to like more than ask, like, to intervene about this is, ah, it ran for me. Like I was, while you were talking, I was saying I need to ask also this, and I yeah, okay, it's fine, I guess. Let's ask from more question from Jaza, um, which is also like an interesting topic because it's about AI. So, um, so what he's saying is, controversial question. Use AI heavily in the creation of chat, as far as I can tell from the README. How have you found that Chatto is intentionally developed with coding agent? Like how have you found your experience with developing Chatto with agents?
Um, so I think I mostly lucked out with that. I'm understanding the question, and how did I find my way to the setup that I have now, right? Is that the question, or is the question like how
I
am
think,
I enjoying it?
yeah, I think it's more about like how, like, are you happy about developing with AI?
Oh,
What are
very,
the processes and stuff like that?
very. So um, I'm going to go a little bit wider with the answer, right? If I talk too much, please stop me.
No worries.
Um, so something that's kind of fun about Chatto is that I've already been working on this for almost a year, right? I think I started writing the first lines of code something like September-ish last year, something like that, right? And back then, I actually did write everything myself, right? I wasn't using AI for it. And we just had a community Q&A session yesterday where I talked about this extensively because I think um, that was a deciding factor in like finding the right design, both visually but also in terms of the software, how the software is cut, to do that before actually letting the robots in and letting the robots take over. Um, which happened in, I would say, December-ish last year, January, something like that. So just yesterday, I admitted publicly, and I'm going to do it again, I haven't written a single line of code manually since January this year, right? And something that I like to say to people is that I've never written or I've never produced code as good as the code that I've produced since January, but also I've never written a single line of code. I haven't written a single line of code since January. I use agentic engineering quite heavily, 100%, right? 100% of what's going on in Chatto is built with the help of agents, and even beyond that, pretty much everything that I'm doing is done with agents. When there's a problem in my production cluster, right? The first thing I do is I talk to the agent. And I'm not like, something is wrong, please fix it, right? This is always a conversation that I'm having with the agent. We're doing this together. And I've put quite a lot of work, and I would be happy to show that. So I have a repository closed source, right? This is something that nobody else has seen so far. It's called Chatto Umbrella, and it's basically it's a little bit like a monorepo setup, right? I have all the different Chatto sub-repositories in here. It's not a real monorepo because I didn't really want to solve the problem of some of that being public, some of that being closed. But the idea is that I basically have a sort of hub directory, umbrella directory that has additional skills. So for example, I have one skill that just teaches the agent about my company, right? I have one skill that teaches the agent about my infrastructure, right? It tells the agent I need to scroll a little bit faster because, of course, there are some, well, it's none of your business what's in this file, and so on and so forth, right? So I have quite a few of these, right? Some of these also live in the Chatto repository as well. When you look at the open source Chatto repository, you will also find quite a few skills that I use on a regular basis in my work on Chatto itself. But basically, the skills in here are the extra superpowers that I've added to my agents. They have access to the Kubernetes clusters that I operate. They have access to the Prometheus metrics, right? They can read logs from individual Chatto instances. So actually, when something does go wrong, instead of manually, finding the right log, looking at it, and then thinking about the code and like trying to find the bug, I am working with the agent on that fully, and it's excellent. It's working really well. This is, I think, as far removed from the fantasy of like just opening ChatGPT and entering, "Hey, ChatGPT, build me a chat app, make it fast," as you can imagine, right? And I think this also maybe explains a little bit why it's taken me almost a year, right? And almost half a year, or roughly half a year of full-time agentic engineering. I've had some people go like, "Hey, I thought AI makes everybody so fast. Like, what the hell were you doing for 6 months? Why does this take you so long?" Right? And the thing is, if I took everything that I know about Chatto and Chatto's design today, and I wrote a huge prompt, and I made it really detailed, and I would say, "Okay, please cut it this way, please implement those features, please use nats in the backend and Jetstream, and please do this and please do that," then I could probably reproduce the whole thing in a long session that's spanning a week or two, right? So that might work. But the real value in this setup, and that's really the main reason why I love it so much, is it makes it easy to experiment. It makes it easy to change things. The design of Chatto has evolved quite a bit over the last 6 to 9 months, right? So Chatto today is very different internally from Chatto 6 months ago. And in ways that if I had been doing this entirely manually, and I've done my share of like writing software the classic way, because I've been doing this for 3 decades now. But if I had done this the classic way, each of these architecture changes would have been multiple months of work. And basically what would have happened,
like in the sense that people say, "Yeah, I told AI make you faster," and like writing a chat application in 6 months is faster. Like it's not
yeah,
it's not a like I'll just, I don't know, write a landing page. Like obviously it will take multiple months with multiple people working on it. So the fact that
yeah,
you are working on it by yourself, uh, like in like in with an agent, it is faster. And
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I
But
absolutely
also,
like also agree with the rest in the fact that like people tend to associate AI coding with vibe coding, but it's absolutely far from true. Like as you've seen, like as you've said, like there are a bunch of conscious decisions that you made during this process, which is the engineering part about
yes,
like the agentic engineering.
yes,
And like it's exactly what leads to good software, even if it's wrote with AI. Like
yes,
you are making the decision, you are collaborating with the agent, you are not just like blindly accept everything. You are reviewing the code, seeing like what works, what not, and like going back and forth with it.
Yes, and just the migration to a different type of API is the perfect example, right? Um, because what I did when I moved from GraphQL to Connect RPC, right? I also did this with the agent. I made a plan with the agent. I had the agent execute, and I actually had one long session. I started with one long session that literally was the prompt, please just loop until GraphQL is gone and everything is connect RPC, right? And the end result worked, but it was terrible, right? In terms of API design, it was a complete piece of junk. The agent basically just went far enough to make everything work, which is perfectly fine, and it's already a great achievement. But then I spent another week basically doing API polishing, right, and going through the whole thing over and over again, going through every RPC function, going through the function signatures, going through the types, and basically fixing it, but also not manually, right? I just told the agent, okay, look, this works, but there's a little bit of overlap between those two functions. How do you feel about that? And these conversations are just really amazing because sometimes the agent did actually push back on some design decisions, right? So a lot of people believe that coding agents never do that and always just do whatever you tell them to do, right? But there was this one instance where I asked it, okay, look, we have two functions that do the same thing, but they exist in different Connect RPC namespaces. Shouldn't this just be one function? And the agent told me, yeah, we could do that. But look, I know that, because I told it, I know that you want to give your users an API stability guarantee, and you're going to have an easier time if you put the stable version into that one namespace and leave the unstable version of it that you can just change freely because it just exists for the front end, right? Put that into a different namespace. And these conversations are just so cool. It's just it creates so much value. And I spent a week on it, right? And a week, sort of like in 2026 terms, it feels like quite a lot of time. But if I hadn't done it that way, this would have been a 3 to 4 month project. And it would probably just have resulted in me giving up on the project because just writing a complete API from scratch really isn't a whole lot of fun.
Yeah. By the way, this actually gives me a bit of a segue in something else that I wanted like the community to know. It's a bit of a self plug, so sorry, but I think it's interesting because speaking of agentic engineering, if you, I don't know if you know, but like at my company, I basically did a series, a YouTube series about agentic engineering, and we are doing a Q&A for about agentic engineering next week. So like on the 15th, there is the link. It's on the screen right now, and I'm also passing it on in chat. So if you are interested about chatting about agentic engineering with Svelte specifically, you can register for free on this. By the way, just a small announcement because I think it's nice. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't know, like if you have any other, like I think you wanted also to talk a bit about the backend part, or we can close it here depending on where.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up. So I'd be super stoked to talk about the backend, but if I get started, I won't stop for 2 hours.
That's fine.
So
Okay.
maybe if just to close that up, if people are interested in this, right, and also about learning more about the stuff that we didn't talk about today, I'd be super stoked to have them like show up in the community. It's free to sign up, right? We do occasional Q&As in that community where I talk about specifics, right? And I'm generally happy to answer questions for people who want to learn more about the backend stack and other aspects of this project.
That's great. Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you for showing. Thank you for making.
Thank you.
Because I think it's a very nice. I was eyeing it, and I will definitely need to. I will probably join your community because I think
That would
it's
be
enough
awesome.
to have like an opportunity, not an opportunity. How is it called? Not an opportunity, huh? Like a different alternative. Yeah, that's the word that I was trying to come up with. Thank you very much. Thank you guys for joining me, and thank you for sticking with us. And I hope you learned something. And again, if you want to join the Q&A on next Tuesday, we'll talk there. And next week, I will not be here for this week in Svelte because I'm traveling. But see you around. And by the way, Hendrik, see you in Munich in a bit because we will also probably meet in real life.
We will. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. And I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.